Studying the Word of God can be difficult. One of the easiest ways to study the Bible is one verse at a time, but at times it can seem overwhelming. Our goal in this podcast is to wrestle with the text and dive in deeper. We pray that this edifies you and empowers you to fall deeper in love with the Bible and Jesus. Welcome to Everyday Theology.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Everyday Theology Podcast. And all those noises that you were hearing during the opening was Scott, who doesn't know how to be quiet. He's got a protein shake, I assume is what that is.
Yes, I do.
Nice, with the little metal ball in there, and it's making noise. And you even heard him laugh a little bit because before we, start that thing, we're laughing and making stupid jokes and doing all that. So you guys get to hear some of this break through from time to time.
That's the wrong sound effect.
Well,
we're supposed to be quiet.
When the
song's playing.
We're
they
supposed to be
told me to be quiet when the music's on.
Well, yes, and until then, hey, every time Sean speaks, just turn the music up.
Okay.
Yes, because while that music's going, our mics are live. This is what we do. This is fun. So we are in Genesis chapter 4. We've been tracking with the storyline of the very beginning, and it's just been utterly devastating, hasn't it? You've got the fall in Genesis 3, the exile at the end of 3, out of the Garden of Eden, and now you've got Cain killing Abel, the beginning part of chapter 4, and now he's cursed, and the ground is cursed, and everybody's cursed, and they all have to go. He has to go away from his family. He's now a wanderer on the earth. And we're going to look for the next few minutes together at the rest of chapter 4, verses 16 to 26, where Cain lives out his punishment from the Lord. He is exiled, and he goes out, and we get this glimpse of the lineage that comes after him, Cain's line. Which, interestingly enough, scholars call it the Cainites. I didn't know that, so it's not the Canaanites. That comes later. But the Cainites, which I think it's ironic they sound the same because they're both cursed people groups who are wretched and sinful. But you have Cain's line, and then we have some other, the introduction of Seth and his godly line, which is the line of promise that the book of Genesis will continue to track for us.
The Sethites.
So let's just talk about the Cainites for a minute. Cain, verse 16, went out from the presence of Yahweh. That's a loaded phrase.
Yeah, it is.
Settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. So anytime the Bible talks about them going east, it's away from the promised land. It's away from God. So they're outside.
Is there a book called East of Eden?
Yeah, John Steinbeck? Is that?
Oh, it's like fiction?
Right. Yeah, it's like a literature. It's not a Christian book.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but yes, that's
I'm up to speed on
that's where it comes from.
literature.
That makes sense. Maybe that's the way out of the garden, the way out of the temple, or the tabernacle.
Everybody's going east. When they're exiled to Babylon, they go east. Mm-hmm. And when they are coming back, it's back towards God. So it's a good way of saying you're banished from the Lord's presence, from his family. Mm. And he goes to the land of Nod, which is a play on words, because God has condemned him to be a wanderer. Wanderer is the Hebrew word Nod.
Really?
Yes. So he goes to the land of wandering. But when he gets there, what does he do, guys?
He settles down. That's not what a wanderer is supposed to do.
The very next sentence.
Yes.
Come on, man.
So he
walked like 6 feet, and he's like, man,
I'm tired.
This looks good. I'll settle here.
Yeah, I like this. This is pretty. So what Cain does in settling here is direct rebellion against God. The Lord has sentenced him to be a wanderer, nomadic existence on the earth, and Cain just doesn't do it, which fits with what we know of Cain.
Didn't really listen to God the first time.
No, God is the one who sat down with him and said, listen, if you go down this road, sin's gonna pounce on you. It's gonna take over. And he just
lying at the door.
Yeah, he just ignores God. So he does that again. He gets the protection from God, this mark, and he goes out and immediately, again, excuse me, same verse. He's now instantaneously in rebellion against God, settling down and he builds a city. That's about as anchoring as you can get to build a city, a dwelling. He's not moving around anymore. So he builds this city and begins to reproduce, takes his wife. Let's just talk about that for a second. Where did Cain get his wife?
Well, it's uncomfortable, but
All right, everyone, that's all the time we have.
Yes.
had that in your pocket for a couple minutes, haven't you?
Ian basically told me to do it.
yeah.
Yeah. It was my fault.
Yeah.
He said drown him out, not in the podcast.
He's my boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was his sister.
It was his sister. That's right.
Samaritan woman, stay away.
If
Is that better?
she's not Samaritan, but close. So chapter 5, verse 4.
Options were limited.
Yes, says that Adam and Eve had other sons and daughters. So the 3 boys listed in chapter 4 are not the only 3 children that they have. So there are other children. So it's likely a sister.
This is actually a very common.
Yeah, this was normal.
No, like this. Where did Cain get his wife? It's a very common question that people have to go like,
yeah.
"Oh, the Bible's inaccurate. Where did Cain get his wife?"
Right.
Though that's like ammunition for people, but it's very
not.
explained. Yeah, it's not. It's explained very simply.
Yep.
We're operating off
sister.
of our standards here in the 21st century.
Right.
Which incest is bad. Like it is bad, but this was right after creation.
It was necessary.
Yeah, it was necessary.
If it was just,
what else are you going to do?
Yeah. If they didn't, then,
And when did God?
population would have ended pretty quick.
When did God stop that?
Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy.
Yeah. Yeah. So it once it's no longer necessary, because again, all of these generations do this, all of them. So, even when we get to Abraham, and he lies about Sarah, you say you're my sister. Well, it was sort of true.
She was a half-sister.
She was a half sister.
Yeah.
So this is the normal way of reproduction. You stay, even the tribes of Israel, they stay within their family camp.
Yeah.
So they didn't even want to intermarry. Even from the tribes.
Well, this will come up too when we talk about. I'm sure we'll talk about how old people were.
Right.
Maybe even next week. Right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, we forget these people lived 900 years.
Yeah, and so there are very smart creation scientists, creation geneticists who can show you with different models that that genetics at one point, if you go back in history, are more and more pure.
They're pure, right?
And the further we get along the line, like today, there are more genetic mutations,
right?
And to where it if incest is a problem, well, I mean it's very much a social thing as well, but it's a problem because of the genetic mutations.
Right.
That wouldn't have been the case here because their genetics were so much better.
Yeah.
At that point.
Well, they're still living in the light of the perfection of the garden. That perfect image of God is still in them in some ways that we don't experience today. It's why they could live for centuries, and we can barely live for 80 years.
Yeah,
things have dramatically changed, and oddly enough, even in non-Christian models of the birth of civilization and humanity and the Fertile Crescent and all of those. Even non-Christian models that look back and say civilization started at some point with 2 people, there had to be incest. There had to be. There is no other way for civilization to expand. So we unapologetically go, well, it was his sister. Again, to our ears, you're right, Sean. That just sounds so odd. But once it was no longer necessary, God outlaws it in His Old Testament law before we're even out of the Pentateuch. And it's been outlawed since then, and rightly so. But at the beginning, it wasn't a problem. It was necessary. This is the way that civilization worked. So that's where Cain got his wife. So don't let that be a bullet somebody tries to use against your faith. That's just not the case. So it gives birth to Enoch, and he builds the city and names it Enoch. Which is a pretty rare thing that he to do that, but it's his progeny. This is now his hope. Is all in his son. It's in the culture that they're building. And then all of a sudden we get all these generations listed, and only some of them get some comments. Many of them we have.
I was wondering how you're going to preach through.
Yeah,
5.
Yeah, we don't know anything about Irad. That kind of stuff. There's no comments at all given, but all of it is designed to lead us to Lamech here in this text for a couple of reasons. Lamech takes 2 wives. That's a first. So this ungodly line of Cain in rebellion and rejection of God and his ways are the ones to introduce polygamy into the world and undo God's design from Genesis 2. So this is the first instance of that. It's celebrated. So you've got that issue as well. And their children are the culture builders of early civilization. Jabal, Jubal, Tubal. And Tubal even getting the namesake of his ancestor, Cain, Tubal Cain, which is a helpful reminder that this is the line that we're talking about here. So you've got the professional farmers trading livestock. You've got husbandry, that kind of thing in that line. You've got
musicians, yeah,
in another line, and then you've got metallurgy in the third line. Workers in bronze and iron. They're making tools. They're making weapons. So this song that Lamech sings in verse 23 and 24 is known as the Song of the Sword.
That's a song?
It's a song.
Okay.
Well, I mean, poetry, either way. So he's...
The Song of the Sword? That's cool.
It's known as the Song of the Sword.
That's a nice name.
Why is it known as that? Because he has weapons. Because his son is the only one in the world who's creating weapons. So, which is such a neat... that like in my head, that clicked. So Cain cried out for God's protection. Lamech doesn't. Lamech is like taunting. Bring it on. I'll kill anybody, and I'll over respond to anything. Why? Because he's the only guy in the world that has weapons. Mm-hmm. So
says something about your nature when you're the one collecting weapons.
Yep.
What do you need weapons for?
This guy literally is going to run the world, because not only does he have weapons, he's got technology for farming, he's got technology for building that no one else has. It's his son that designs all that stuff. So, I mean, this guy's a big deal, and he's about as nasty and wretched as you can imagine.
See, when I was reading this morning, I didn't take that. So he's bragging in verse 23 and 24?
Yeah, he's bragging.
This is a celebratory thing? See, I didn't, that's not how I understood it, because he's...
Did you understand it almost like a confession?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and almost, so I understood it as almost guilt-laden, because he says, if Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold, like I'm that much worse almost.
Oh.
So I interpreted it completely wrong.
Yep, you were wrong.
Yep.
That's dumb.
Okay. We'll do it the way you say to do it, I guess.
But I think that would be an understandable way to read it. And we're over. So it's the opposite of what's happening with the 7 and the 77 is, if God's going to do that with him, it's even more so for me.
I'm that much more
important,
awesome,
powerful, that much more of a big deal. And we've already got the 2 wives thing. So he is absolutely unconcerned with the ways of God.
No,
he's not remorseful. He's not repentant. He's bragging.
Wow. See, that's a lot to dig out. I was sitting here thinking, what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? But I mean, that's a lot right there.
Yeah.
Right
I mean,
there
it's such this cool thing. And little fun side note, because this isn't going to come out in sermons or whatever. Verse 22, there's a 4th child listed after Tubal Cain. Naamah is listed. It's the only girl that's listed in the genealogies here, in these early genealogies. So scholars go, why is she even brought up? Like, who cares? She's not one of the culture builders like the 3 boys are, but she is mentioned, but there's no clarifying. There's no, she did this or whatever. It's just this name. So ancient Jews say that was Noah's wife. That's how they explain why she's listed.
Well, there's no other women listed. I'm looking through chapter 5 here too.
Yeah. Again, it's all fabricated. I mean, nobody knows but that's their take on that. This is Noah's wife. Yeah, because they would have overlapped.
Things that make you go,
yeah. So if they lived near each other, but what that would imply is the two lines intermarried.
Oh, that's what I was
at that point, which is what prompts the flood.
That's
if that's how you take Genesis 6.
so. That's a whole different take on the Sethite view of the Nephilim. But
Yes, that the lines intermarry, Cain's line and Seth's line. So if you take the Sethite view, Noah was guilty of it too.
Well, I was gonna say that would kick Noah's family out.
It would. So, which is interesting that Jews would do this.
Yeah.
If they're so big on the lineage.
Because the Sethite view is wrong. That's why.
when are we going to talk about that? A couple weeks?
He would, yeah. Well,
Chapter 6.
Yeah, he'd rather talk about giants and fallen angels.
Yeah, me too.
Well, you just mentioned that. I'm like, wait a minute here.
Yeah,
That's got implications that are.
So, because what's interesting. So, dear listener, if you have no idea what we're talking about right now, we'll get to that in a few weeks with chapter 6. It's actually after Thanksgiving that we get to chapter 6 because we've got a couple special weeks in there.
Oh, yeah.
And a week off because of the holiday. But there is an emphasis, though, in the text about these two lines. So I think there's merit to the Sethite view. Whether I hold it or not is a different issue altogether because the other one's way more fun to view it with the Nephilim and all that. But I think there is a place to go, it would be a big deal if these two lines intermarried because you've got a clear contrast between Cain's line and Seth's line. And God wouldn't want them intermarried. Again, not saying that that's what's going on in Genesis 6, but I think the premise of it would still hold true theologically. The intermarrying of God's people with those who are not God's people, because Cain's line are clearly not his people. So
I'd like mentioned here is not the Enoch that was taken by God. That's the Enoch from the Seth line, not
right. Yeah, this is not.
This
that,
isn't like there's this really godly man here in this. That's
not
the case.
Not in chapter 4. That Enoch's in chapter 5.
Yeah.
He's
we'll
a
get
different.
to him. Don't think this is him.
No, he's a different Enoch.
I would like to see that I doubt what you're saying, but I would like to see the evidence for why they think, just from this one mention, that goes to Noah. There's a lot of, I mean, the next, 31 verses are genealogies of people.
Yep. See,
seems like a stretch.
Yeah. So in fact, one scholar called it Jewish imagination. And I think that's probably a really good way, because they're just trying to explain away why that name is there. Well, I think what you've done by implication, and maybe without intention, is you've intermarried the two lines, which as Jews, you should care about that way more.
Yeah.
You don't want these lines intermarried, because Noah is found blameless in chapter 6. I'm not sure you could call him blameless if he's married into Cain's line.
Not so much in chapter 9, but chapter 6 is still good.
Yeah, not everything goes downhill again in chapter 9, even at the restart, because they're all sinners with a sin nature now. So anyway, all that as a side note to say,
there's two ways to live.
Yeah, there's.
And that's all the time we have.
That's
literally.
That's it. So we've got the Cain line that, again, it culminates with Lamech in violence, rebellion against God and his ways. Marriage has been undermined. Life has been undermined, all of that. And then out of nowhere, in verse 25, we're introduced to Seth. Another son is born. Abel's been killed. Cain has been rejected. So how in the world is God's promise of the seed in 3:15 going to come to fruition? It's going to be here. And Eve mentions it specifically in verse 25. God has set for me another seed in place of Abel. He doesn't, when Cain is born, she says, I've gotten a man. She uses a different word here. She now uses seed from Genesis 3:15. So she's growing. She's learning. She's coming to understand God's promises. She's a person of faith at this point. Another seed in place of Abel, and now from that line, from Seth's line, all the good and godly things are going to come. A son is born, Enosh. In the end of 26, then men began to call upon the name of Yahweh. So public worship of Yahweh by name. He's not a generic Elohim. God of power. He's now personally known by this line, by the Seth line. He's now worshipped and known. Cain's line isn't doing this, only Seth's line. And this line will have some great stuff come out of it. You've got Enoch coming that walks with God. You've got Noah coming. You've got another Lamech, but he's a good one, the father of Noah. And now you have that whole line that comes after with also 3 sons, much like the Lamech of chapter 4, but one is cursed and Shem is blessed, and how all that works. So again, everything comes back to Genesis 3:15 and the promise of that seed, that one to come. Now Genesis is going to track for us that line and who it is that's coming to defeat the serpent.
So Seth, the replacement or substitute here for, Abel. Now, then eventually from his line then comes the ultimate substitute.
Absolutely. Again, there's gospel-y good stuff here. Seth's name.
Gospel-y good stuff.
Gospel-y good stuff. There's super nerdy fun stuff, and there's gospel-y good stuff. So Seth's name means appointed, which comes from verse 25, has set for me another seed. He's set for me Seth. Another seed appointed for me, but can be translated as substitute, because he's the replacement now for Abel. And from that line comes the substitute, the one who stands in our place at the cross. And as our substitute dies our death, takes our punishment onto himself so that we might live. What a beautiful picture of gospel-y good stuff. All embedded in Genesis chapter 4.
Yeah, and really you do see the 2 ways to live. You can celebrate sin, or you can call upon the name of the Lord, call upon the name of Yahweh.
Yep.
And that's,
go ahead.
That's true today.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's true for us.
And there's these hints of kind of cultural success of Cain's line. They're literally building cities and culture. That's a big deal. We benefit from that. That's wonderful. But it's accompanied by sin, immorality. Not that Seth's line aren't sinners, they are, but it's highlighted in the midst of this success without faith. That's just hopeless. But there's Seth's line, and there's no mention of cultural development. What there is mention of is worship. So parents, when you think about the goals that you have for your children, what are they? Are they success? Or is it godliness? That's the difference. So we live in a culture that prizes Cain's way of living. Faith's okay, it's fine, but let's talk about success and your legacy and wealth and all the things that you're going to build. Seth's line, the godly line, is not concerned about that at all. What they're concerned about is knowledge of the Lord. And all that other stuff comes later. Yeah, we'll care about that later, but first priority is the Lord.
Yeah.
That's how you live with hope. That's how you live in the godly line as God's people. Let the ungodly world live focused on success. Let's focus on faith. That's what matters the most. Yeah. This is infinitely practical. So what matters most in my own life when I approach my career, those kinds of things, what matters the most?
They have to focus on stuff because they don't have eternal life to focus on.
It's all they have.
Yeah.
Right? It's all they have.
This is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah. It is your best life now.
You know what?
see what I did there? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Osteen, for writing that book to prove us all right.
It's amazing.
I didn't get it.
It's amazing how
I get it now.
how much you realize that stuff is just stuff after you're born again. Like it's just stuff.
Yep. None of it matters.
Don't read that book.
Yes. Don't read that book.
Best Life Now?
Yeah. Your Best Life Now.
Don't read that book.
It's not a Christian book. It's marketed as that, but it's not a Christian book. Yeah. Your best life now is only your best life now if you're going to heaven.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a sad state.
If you're going to heaven, this is not your best life now. So just ignore that garbage. Yeah. So on that fun note.
Yeah.
Hey, Genesis is fun. I hope you all are enjoying it.
Genesis is really fun.
It's such good stuff. There's so much there.
It's foundational
to ring out. Yeah, it's almost like Genesis 1 to 11 is the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love it. Well, thank you for joining us again for another episode. Thank you for joining us as we ring out the gospel-y goodness in the early chapters of Genesis.
That's going to stick.
It is going to stick.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it. So, John, we need a button that says gospel-y goodness.
Okay.
Yep. All right.
I'm on it.
Bye,
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
This is
See
the
ya.
end. This is the end music for real this time. We're actually saying bye.
Bye.
Or are we? No, we are. Goodbye.
Or did you missed it?
See? We just can't be quiet during the music.
Be quiet!